For decades, Tom Hanks has been America's favorite actor, the man who made us laugh, cry, and believe in good people. But now, at 69, behind that familiar smile is a personal tragedy so painful, so unexpected, it's leaving fans speechless. What really happened to the man who brought us Forrest Gump and Saving Private Ryan? This isn't just another celebrity story. It's something much deeper. The truth behind his heartbreaking journey is finally coming to light, and it's hard to accept. Tom Hanks didn't grow up in the warmth of stability or the comfort of a tight-knit home. His early years were shaped by loneliness, confusion, and a constant sense of not truly belonging anywhere. Born on July 9, 1956, in Concord, California, Tom came into a world that was already a little shaky. His parents, Amos and Janet, weren't wealthy or settled. His father was a cook who moved around for work, and his mother was trying to find her own footing in life. There wasn't much money, and there was even less certainty. When Tom was just 4 years old, his parents divorced. There wasn't a dramatic, loud split. It was more like a quiet fracture that left him and his siblings scattered. Tom and two of his siblings went with their dad, while the youngest stayed with their mom. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. For Tom, it was the collapse of the only sense of family he had known. From then on, life became a series of temporary addresses. By the time he turned 10, Tom had lived in 10 different homes. Most were small rentals, often filled with someone else's leftover smell or chipped paint on the walls. He slept in borrowed beds, ate simple meals, and moved often enough that making friends felt pointless. Every move meant starting over. A new school, new kids, new rules. And in every cafeteria and classroom, Tom was the outsider, the quiet kid trying to figure out where to sit and how to not draw too much attention. He wore the same clothes until they wore out. He learned to keep his head down and be thankful for whatever space he was given. He once said, "I was a geek, an outsider." But that label doesn't fully capture the depth of what he felt. He learned early on not to expect consistency, love, or even kindness from the world. His version of home became a suitcase. But even in that drifting life, there was one place where Tom felt a little less invisible: the stage. In school auditoriums with flickering lights and dusty curtains, he discovered acting. When he stepped into another character, people listened. When he performed, there was applause. And for a boy who had grown up feeling like a shadow, that applause meant everything. It wasn't about fame or attention. It was about finally being seen, even if only for a moment. Still, every show ended. The lights dimmed, the curtain fell, and Tom went home to another unfamiliar room, and another night in a bed that didn't feel like his. Years later, when people would call him the kindest man in Hollywood, he would quietly describe his childhood with one word: lonely. That honesty hits hard, especially coming from someone who spent his career making audiences feel safe, comforted, and understood. Historians insipidly slam Lance before critics. Personal to the core, but it was in those quiet, painful years that Tom made a promise to himself, that if he ever found success, he would use it to make people feel less alone. He would be the voice for the kids sitting by themselves, the ones who never felt at home. That early loneliness shaped not just the man, but the actor he became. His performances, filled with depth and heart, come from a place of real understanding, because he's been there. He knows what it feels like to be the invisible one. And so, while the world sees the polished, smiling Tom Hanks, what lives underneath is a man who had to build himself out of broken pieces. His early life didn't give him comfort or privilege. It gave him empathy. It taught him how much it matters to be noticed, to be included, to be loved. And that's what he's been giving back ever since. Tom Hanks didn't walk into Hollywood with the doors wide open. His path to success was long, rough, and full of uncertainty. He didn't have a famous name or wealthy parents to pull strings. What he had was a battered suitcase, an old typewriter, and a whole lot of quiet determination. After dropping out of Sacramento State University, he packed up what little he owned and took a bus to New York. He was just 21, and the only thing he really knew was that he couldn't go back to the life he came from, a life where he felt invisible, like he didn't matter. New York, with all its flashing lights and noise, wasn't as magical as the postcards made it look. The apartments were tiny, the rent was sky high, and the city didn't care whether Tom made it or not. He shared rooms with strangers, slept on floors or couches, and often ate whatever he could buy with a handful of coins. His early meals were more about survival than enjoyment. Casting calls became his only real hope, but most of them ended in silence. No callbacks, no encouragement, just rejection. Tom later said that after most auditions, he was sure the casting directors didn't see anything special in him. He didn't have that edge they were looking for. He wasn't flashy, wasn't loud, didn't ooze confidence. In fact, his kindness, which would later become his signature, worked against him. Hollywood at the time wanted swagger. They wanted stars with sharp elbows and big egos. Tom Hanks was just a nice guy with a funny voice and a goofy smile, and back then, that didn't count for much. But he kept going. He didn't stop auditioning. He didn't let the rejections shut him down. He took every job he could find. Bit parts in small theater shows, tiny roles in indie films, stage crew work in local theaters. He acted, built sets, hung lights, swept floors. Whatever it took to stay close to the world he loved. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing the next meal and a reason to keep believing in himself. In 1980, things started to shift. Not dramatically, but just enough to matter. He landed a role on the sitcom Bosom Buddies, where he had to dress as a woman just to get his character an apartment. The show was ridiculous and didn't last long, but for Tom, it was his first real crack in the wall. He was finally on TV. He was finally being noticed. And yet, even then, the fear never left. Every time a job ended, he worried it might be the last, that he'd go back to auditions where no one saw him, back to couches, back to nothing. As the 1980s rolled on, Tom slowly became a face people recognized. He was funny, charming, relatable. He made people laugh without trying too hard. Films like Splash and Big helped him break into leading roles, and by the end of the decade, he was a full-on movie star. But success didn't erase the fear. In fact, it added pressure. Now he had something to lose. Every new role came with the question, can I do this again? Am I still good enough? Then came the 1990s, the decade that changed everything for him. Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, Saving Private Ryan, The Green Mile. These weren't just films, they were moments. They were emotional, powerful, unforgettable stories, and Tom Hanks was right at the center of them. But what most people don't see is the toll those roles took on him. For Philadelphia, he lost over 35 pounds to play a man dying of AIDS. That weight loss wasn't just physical, it affected his entire being. He stepped into the shoes of a character facing discrimination and death. And even when filming ended, the emotional weight didn't just disappear. Forrest Gump was another huge success, and it came with a huge risk. Instead of taking a standard paycheck, Tom agreed to a cut of the film's profits. That decision paid off. He earned over $70 million, 0 cents. But it also put more pressure on him. Now he wasn't just acting, he was betting on himself and on a film no one knew would become a classic. It worked out, but behind the smile, the pressure was real. With Saving Private Ryan, the intensity of the story and the brutal realism of the war scenes drained him emotionally. He said the exhaustion from that film wasn't just physical, it was moral. Playing a role like that meant carrying the trauma with him, even after the cameras stopped rolling. And Castaway was one of the most physically challenging performances of his life. The production stopped for months so he could lose weight and grow a beard. He isolated himself, lived in silence, and completely transformed his body and mind. That kind of isolation gets into your bones. It changes you. As he reached the height of his career, Tom wasn't just playing roles. He was carrying them, living them, feeling every inch of the pain, joy, and heartbreak of the characters he brought to life. And the world applauded. He won Oscars. He earned respect. He became America's dad. But what people didn't see was the wear and tear beneath the surface. The late nights alone. The doubts that never quite went away. The quiet question in the back of his mind. Am I still enough? He talked openly, later in life, about how few of his films he actually felt proud of. Not because they were bad, but because he held himself to a brutally high standard. That perfectionism, the thing that made him great, also wore him down. He second-guessed scenes, questioned performances, and never fully let himself rest. Even when the world saw him as the most dependable actor in Hollywood, Tom was still carrying that invisible boy inside him. The one who had lived in 10 homes by the time he was 10 years old. The one who just wanted to matter. As years passed, he began to pick projects more carefully. He stopped chasing blockbusters and started choosing stories with heart. He cared more about impact than money, more about meaning than fame. He used his platform to tell stories that might help someone else feel seen, Just like the stage once helped him feel seen. But fame never gave him peace, not really. It gave him opportunity, respect, and comfort, yes, but peace? That was something he had to build for himself. He said there were nights when he came home from shooting emotional scenes and sat alone in silence, wondering who he was when the cameras weren't rolling. Wondering if all the love the world showed him on screen could ever truly fill the quiet places inside. And yet, through all of it, the early struggles, the quiet battles, the pressure to perform, Tom Hanks stayed true to who he was. He didn't become jaded. He didn't turn cold. He became more generous, more thoughtful, more driven to do work that mattered. He proved that you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be flashy to make a difference. You just have to show up, again and again. And even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, that's what Tom Hanks did and still does. He kept showing up. Tom Hanks might be seen by the world as the perfect family man, charming, loyal, dependable, but his personal life, just like anyone else's, has been marked by deep love, painful loss, and scars that never fully healed. Behind the smiles and the Hollywood charm is a man who's been through heartbreak, regret, and quiet battles that rarely made headlines. His first experience with love wasn't the fairy tale many expected. At just 21, Tom married Samantha Luz. He was young, scared, and still carrying the weight of his broken childhood. For Tom, marriage wasn't just about love. It was a way to escape the loneliness that had followed him since his parents' divorce. He wanted to build a family, to finally feel like he belonged somewhere. But youth and fear don't always mix well. Though they had 2 children together, Colin and Elizabeth, the relationship was fragile. The pressures of fatherhood, the demands of a struggling career, and his own emotional wounds made things harder. Tom later admitted that he wasn't ready. He had confused desperation for love, and though he tried to make it work, the marriage slowly fell apart. By 1987, the divorce was finalized. He was devastated, not just by the end of the marriage, but by the guilt that came with it. He had promised himself as a child that he'd never repeat his parents' mistakes. And now, he was watching his own kids live between 2 homes, just like he once had. Despite the separation, Tom never stopped caring for Samantha. When she was diagnosed with bone cancer years later, he didn't hesitate to step in. He helped with treatment, visited her often, and was there when she needed someone the most. She wasn't his wife anymore, but she was the mother of his children, and someone he had once deeply loved. Her illness and passing weren't just sad, they reopened old wounds that had never truly closed. Tom had always carried a quiet sense of failure about that chapter of his life, but life gave him a second chance. Not long after his divorce, he met Rita Wilson. Their connection started on set, grew quietly, and turned into something real. They took their time, got to know each other without the pressure of fame, and slowly built a relationship rooted in trust and understanding. They married in 1988, and over the decades, their love became one of Hollywood's most respected partnerships. Rita wasn't just his wife, she became his anchor, his best friend, and the one person who truly understood the quieter parts of his soul. Together they faced everything, from the highs of career success to the lowest moments of health scares and personal struggles. In 2015, when Rita was diagnosed with breast cancer, everything stopped. Tom wasn't an actor during that time. He was a husband holding his wife's hand through surgeries, chemo, and recovery. He later said it was one of the hardest periods of his life, not because he was afraid of losing her fame, but because he was afraid of losing the one person who made him feel whole. Their bond grew even stronger during that time, and when, in 2020, both of them tested positive for COVID-19 while overseas, it felt like life was testing them again. Tom was already managing type 2 diabetes, a condition he had kept private for years, and the virus hit them hard. There were nights filled with fear, moments where he wrote quiet letters just in case the worst happened. But they got through it, together, side by side, leaning on each other like they always had. Through it all, Tom remained a father, not just in name but in presence. He raised 4 children, Colin, Elizabeth, Chet, and Truman. He has always been proud of Colin's career and respectful of Elizabeth's privacy. But his relationship with Chet in particular has carried its own weight. Chet struggled publicly with addiction and wild behavior that caught media attention. For Tom, it was heartbreaking. He had spent so much of his life trying to build a safe, grounded family, and seeing his son suffer reminded him too much of the pain from his own childhood. Still, he didn't walk away. He supported Chet through rehab, stayed close during the storms, and never gave up hope. He didn't try to fix everything or control the outcome. He just showed up. That's how Tom loves. Not with loud declarations, but with quiet, constant presence. Over the years, the public saw the awards, the standing ovations, the roles that made people cry or laugh. But behind all that, there was a man who sometimes sat in a quiet room, wondering if he had done enough as a father, if his kids truly knew how much he loved them, and if the applause meant anything when his heart felt heavy. Now in his late 60s, Tom Hanks continues to live a life shaped not just by success, but by love and by the losses that have come with it. He doesn't pretend everything has been easy. He knows what it's like to sit in silence, to carry guilt, to hope for healing, and to hold someone's hand when they're scared. That's what makes him who he is. His story isn't one of perfection. It's one of resilience. A quiet fight to love well, even when it hurts. To stay when it's hard. To be the father, husband, and man he once needed as a child. And that, more than any Oscar or headline, is what defines Tom Hanks. Today, Tom Hanks lives a life that looks calm from the outside. There are no scandals, no loud headlines, and no constant rush for the spotlight. But behind that calm is something deeper, something stronger. At 69, he's no longer chasing fame or approval. He's settled into a quiet strength, a kind of peace that only comes after decades of climbing, falling, loving, losing, and learning what really matters. He lives with his wife, Rita Wilson, in a beautiful home in Los Angeles. It's a place filled with light and space, a far cry from the tiny, shared apartments of his youth. But it's not the house or the wealth that defines this chapter of his life. It's the simplicity. Tom has always found comfort in the small, ordinary things. Long walks with Rita, cooking together, laughing with their kids, watching the sunset from their Greek island ghetto. These aren't movie scenes. They're the moments that hold him steady now. After everything he's lived through, childhood instability, career pressures, public praise, private heartache, Tom has reached a place where he no longer feels the need to prove anything. He's still working, but only when the project feels meaningful. He picks roles that speak to something real, something human. Films like A Man Called Otto reflect who he is now. Thoughtful, grounded, and focused on stories that bring comfort, hope, or reflection. He's also taken a step into writing essays, short stories, even novels. It's another way he expresses himself, away from cameras and scripts. Through writing, he shares his thoughts on life, character, and the little details that often go unnoticed. It's a quieter kind of storytelling, but no less powerful. And it allows him to keep connecting with people in a different, more personal way. Even with all this wisdom and success, life hasn't exactly gotten easier. His type 2 diabetes requires daily management, and aging brings its own challenges. There are days when his energy is low, when old injuries or aches flare up, when the mirror reflects the truth that time is moving forward. But Tom handles it with grace. He doesn't complain. He doesn't hide it either. He simply adjusts, slows down when needed, and listens to his body. He knows now that strength isn't about pushing through pain. It's about knowing when to rest and how to keep going with care. And that's the kind of strength Tom Hanks represents today. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that endures. The kind that quietly shows up. The kind that helps others feel safe just by being near. He's known as America's dad not because he plays perfect people, but because he brings a sense of safety and honesty to every role. And to his real life. He's also continued to give back. Philanthropy has always been important to him, but he's never been showy about it. Whether it's supporting veterans, donating to medical research, or helping fund arts programs, he gives quietly, often behind the scenes. For him, kindness isn't a performance, it's a responsibility. A choice. A habit. He believes that helping others is part of what makes life meaningful, and he acts on that belief without needing credit. His relationship with his children has also deepened over time. While earlier years brought pain, distance, and confusion, especially with his son Chet, there's now a sense of healing. He's proud of Colin's work, respectful of his daughter's privacy, and hopeful for continued growth in Chet and Truman. He doesn't pretend everything is perfect, but he shows up. He listens. He learns. That, to him, is what being a father means. Especially now. What's most powerful about Tom Hanks today is the way he carries himself. There's no ego, no need to impress. When fans meet him, they're often surprised by how present he is, how fully he listens, how kindly he speaks, how humble he remains after all these years. It's not an act. It's who he is. Fame didn't change him. It revealed his true nature. A man who still believes in decency, in loyalty, in the quiet beauty of doing the right thing, even when no one's watching. He's also aware that his time in the spotlight is beginning to dim, not in terms of relevance, but in priority. He's made peace with that. He doesn't fear getting older. He embraces it, knowing that every year is a gift, especially after health scares and close calls. Each day with Rita, each call from his kids, each walk, each letter, each smile. He doesn't take them for granted. Tom Hanks isn't trying to be a legend. He's just trying to live well, to be kind, to leave behind something better than what he found. And in doing so, he's built a legacy that goes far beyond the screen. His legacy isn't just in Forrest Gump or Saving Private Ryan. It's in the way he treats people, the calm he brings into a room, the stories he chooses to tell, the example he sets for younger actors, and for anyone trying to figure out how to grow older with grace. He's a reminder that fame doesn't have to harden you, that you can succeed without stepping on others, that you can be powerful and still be soft, that kindness, real kindness, still matters. In a world that's often loud and fast and unforgiving, Tom Hanks moves through life at his own pace, steady, open-hearted, and full of purpose. His story today isn't about headlines or awards. It's about the strength it takes to be kind, the wisdom to slow down, and the grace to keep showing up. Even after everything, especially after everything. And that is the quiet, lasting power of Tom Hanks.